What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to my review of Monkey Man, written by Dev Patel and many other people, but solo directed by Dev Patel in his directorial debut and also starring Dev Patel. Man, this was a film that the masses didn't seem to be too aware of, but those who were aware of it were really anticipating it. Those of us who were aware of this movie were very, very hyped for it, very much anticipating it. And much of it was because of a lot of love for Dev Patel, which I adore. I love Dev Patel. I think his performance in The Green Knight is one of the best of the past decade. He's an insanely talented actor, and we have known him as such for a very, very long time, so obviously a lot of us were very happy when he decided to assume more creative control being a director on this film, and of course all of us went fucking nuts when Jordan Peele signed on to the project as a producer. Apparently the story goes that this movie was initially going to be released on Netflix, and then Jordan Peele saw a cut of the movie and he was like, no, are you fucking crazy? You're not gonna dump this on streaming. This needs to be seen in theaters. And even though I was only able to watch it on streaming, that is a very, very respectable decision, because most of the time in which I was watching this movie, I was just thinking to myself, man, I wish I could have seen this in a theater. An anonymous young man unleashes a campaign of vengeance against corrupt leaders who murdered his mother and continue to systemically victimize the poor and powerless. So when people saw the trailer for this movie, a lot of people who didn't really know much about Dev Patel, or were maybe just your casual audience members, seemed to chalk up their conclusion of their impression of it to John Wick, but in Mumbai, and Dev Patel is John Wick now instead of Keanu Reeves. And while this film certainly takes a lot of inspiration from the John Wick franchise, I mean, there's an entire line where they straight up name drop John Wick, I do strongly feel that this film stands on its own and is very much its own thing, which is a very impressive feat for a directorial debut. A lot of directors, when they're making their first feature film, like to play it safe because it's their first time doing this. They don't want to get too ambitious or get too ahead of themselves because of fear of not being able to handle so much of that so soon and so early on in their career. But Dev Patel has been acting in movies and TV shows for a very, very long time. I also think he's done some stage work, but don't quote me on that, I'm not entirely sure. But the point is, I think it's safe to assume that Dev Patel definitely knows how a film set runs and how a film set ideally should be run. And so in a way, he had a very unorthodox film school, getting to always be in front of the camera, but still having a perspective that allowed him to observe how everybody else was working. And assuming Dev Patel has had this directorial thirst in him for a long time, I think it's pretty safe to assume that while he was acting in movies, he was probably keeping a pretty close eye on the director, because he knew one day he would want to be standing behind the camera rather than in front of it. Granted, he does play the titular character in this movie for good reason. One, he's fucking amazing in the movie. Yeah, that's one of the things about this movie. Dev Patel is incredible in this film, and a lot of people tend to view something like this as very egotistical. A lot of times when directors cast themselves in prominent roles in shows or movies that they themselves have written, they see it as, like I said, a very egotistical thing. They just want their name all over it, and they just want all eyes on them. Unfortunately, I really can't connect with that mindset, because I think anyone who writes but also wants to direct and also wants to act, which is seemingly more and more people nowadays, it's so much deeper than that. Obviously, recognition feels good, and it feels good when you get applause, and it feels good when you get standing ovations at film festivals or in auditoriums. But as I said, it goes deeper than that, because when you write a story, or even when you just come across a story that means so much to you, you have this drive to have as much creative control over it as possible, not out of a need to control, not out of this sort of power-hungry trip, but because it genuinely means that much to you and you just want to put everything into it. It's almost like you're begging for the challenge of that. So in my opinion, it's actually extremely admirable rather than egotistical, and I think a lot of other creatives will sympathize with that. One of the things that makes this movie feel very fresh amongst its obvious inspirations is its emphasis on the culture of its setting. I'm somebody who's not personally very knowledgeable on the culture of Mumbai or India as a whole. I know jack shit about the Hindu language, which is interesting because at the college I'm at, I work on campus and there's a lot of transfer students from India who speak that language, and so every day when I go into work, because I work pretty much every day, Wednesday's really my only day off because I'm fucked in the head and I need therapy, but because I work with so many people who grew up in that culture and that is their lifestyle and that's their cultural background, you would think that I would know more about it, but it also probably shouldn't surprise you that that stuff isn't really workplace conversation. I am curious to hear their thoughts on this movie though. A lot of them do love Dev Patel. Whenever we have talked about movies and favorite actors and stuff, a lot of them are like, oh, Dev Patel is really, really great. And I think a couple of them did tell me that they were excited for this. So now that I've actually seen it, when I go into work tomorrow, I want to talk to them about it. I want to ask them, like, hey, I watched Monkey Man last night. Did you see it? Like, I'm very curious to hear their thoughts because I can't personally speak to the accuracy of the culture portrayed in the movie, although with Dev Patel being one of the leading creative forces behind this movie, really the lead creative force, I do have to imagine that it's pretty faithful. All I know is that as a viewer watching it, detached from knowledge about it, seeing how it was depicted in the film, if nothing else, definitely elevated the visual and emotional aesthetics of the film for me as well. Because that's something that I didn't expect going into this film. I knew that it was a revenge film, but I didn't know the exact details of the plot, and above all, I didn't expect this movie to be as relevant as it was. I went into this thinking that it was going to be a really nice action escapism flick, but it actually ended up being super gritty, pretty dark, very violent, and deeply emotionally impactful. That really took me aback, but I am all here for it. Whenever a movie pulls the rug out from under me in that way, I usually fall in love with it, and this is definitely one of those cases. Unfortunately, though, there is a big portion of the second act of this movie that really dragged. And we're talking dragged, okay? There is no need for this movie to be 2 hours long. I'm just being realistic here. I think a good 20 to 30 minutes could have been cut out of this runtime, and you would have had yourself a pretty incredible action film that packs a really good punch when it comes to the violence and the action and the way it's all choreographed, but also packs a really strong emotional punch as well. But unfortunately, there is about 20 to 30 minutes of that second act that really dragged for me. They're not terrible, and most of it is fairly well presented visually, because that's the other thing. We're gonna get into Dev Patel's direction of this movie specifically in a second. While the technical craft of the movie never faltered for me, the narrative and the script and the pacing really did for a pretty big portion of the second act. And another thing is that even though I was super emotionally invested in this movie by the end, that really didn't start happening until the second half. The first act of the movie is very entertaining just from a visual and entertainment perspective, because visually it looks amazing. Dev Patel's direction here is insane. People who are just casual viewers who don't really know anything much about the film industry and they just go to see movies as casual moviegoers, I guarantee you they would not watch this movie and think, oh yeah, this is a first-time director, because it really doesn't feel like it. Dev Patel has so much potential as a director, and I cannot wait to see what scripts he decides to adapt next. But after that first act, it goes into that lull in the second act that I was talking about, and the emotional investment that this movie does end up committing to as a certain point doesn't come until Like, yeah, it doesn't come until like the last hour of the movie, which really unfortunately dragged down the first half of the movie for me, even though there were some pretty thrilling action sequences in that first half that were an absolute eyegasm to observe. And as I said, the movie is always presented well visually and aesthetically, but I won't lie, there were a couple times when I did check the time a little bit and I was like, okay, let's get going. I understand what you're doing here, but I really don't think it needs it. You had something really good going at the start of this film, and I think you should just keep to that track. But guys, when that second half hits, it hits. Particularly one scene where the switch, like the complete 180 that this movie does, happens. It gave me chills. I was covered in goosebumps from head to toe. It affected me emotionally in a way that I really didn't expect. And as I said, the film is surprisingly relevant to today. There's little bits and pieces of dialogue in the first half that kind of seem like maybe they're hinting at some commentary, but when this second half shift happens, the movie never becomes solely a social or political statement, but there are very apparent undertones there, particularly in the way the narrative is told and who the antagonists are and what they do and what our lead character in Dev Patel is fighting for, that I really didn't expect. I was actually surprised how much subject matter that this movie actually had some commentary to give on, and it's really relevant to our current times right now, actually, and because of that, I found myself getting really invested in the second half of this movie, and I was completely on board from that shift all the way until the very end. Speaking of which, no spoilers here, you're safe with me. Something that a lot of revenge movies struggle with is actually achieving a revenge scene that is genuinely cathartic and genuinely satisfying. Not many movies have been able to do it. A lot of great South Korean cinema has been able to do that with movies like Parasite or I Saw the Devil. Those are the examples that pretty much everyone uses when they're talking about the movies that get revenge down to a T. But I would say the vast majority of revenge movies, even some really great ones, like the first John Wick for instance, have a hard time making the revenge scene itself, depending on whether or not the script lets our main character actually get their revenge or not. A lot of times those scenes just aren't very fulfilling. They don't give you what you really want. Guys, this movie hit the fucking nail on the goddamn head. This is one of the best revenge movies I have seen in years if we're just solely focusing on the revenge aspect of it. As I said, there were some other things about it that really didn't work for me, but if we're just talking about this film and what it is at its core, which is a revenge film, they nailed the revenge aspect of this movie. There are scenes in this movie that are so satisfying and so cathartic, and maybe not in the way you would expect given the way that I'm talking about it. You're just gonna have to watch the movie for yourself, and I think you'll know what I mean. Alright, I gotta talk about the action in this film. The action in this film, while we have seen it before in other movies, is still helmed extremely well, and it is absolutely thrilling to watch. There are action scenes in this movie that last for a very long time when we're talking about movie runtimes. I mean, there are 3 action scenes in this film that are so great, they could be the finale action sequence in any other average everyday action movie. There are 2 action sequences in particular in this movie that I think are contenders for all-timers in the genre. I also love that the movie is rated R. Rated R action movies are some of the best out there. The violence in this movie is dirty, gritty, bloody, and kind of gory, honestly. And it was, in kind of a fucked up way, very satisfying to watch. Something I was worried about going into this movie, even though I was really excited for it, was that Dev Patel's character was going to be just kind of your stereotypical stoic action badass, you know, a man of few words. Maybe he has a lot of pent-up emotions that we never really get a peek into, and then one day he just snaps and starts kicking ass. And for the first half of this movie, that is kind of what it was like, and it was kind of a hindrance on the film. Even though you do get little peeks and hints into his past, I think what Dev was trying to do was make you, or like try to I think he was trying to pull us in by just giving us little hints and making us go like, oh, okay, oh, no, I want to know more, and in a way trying to get us to lean forward and stay invested in the movie. And in a way it kind of worked, but I couldn't help but not be very invested in his character until the second half of the movie hit. So it's kind of weird because in a way that worry of mine did happen to be the case, but only in the first half of the movie, and then in the second half of the movie he becomes a significantly deeper character, and you actually become very emotionally invested in him, and it, as I said, results in some very, very satisfying scenes. But at the end of the day, I'm just really not sure what to make of it. On rewatch, it might be better since I have the full context now, but on an initial viewing, I don't know, the fact that there was a big portion of the movie where I wasn't invested in his character kind of made it to where there were moments where I kind of wanted to clock out a little bit. But at the end of the day, guys, they stuck the landing with this one, and if I'm gonna say, like, 50% of the movie is very enjoyable and watchable despite being a little boring and a little draggy from time to time, and then the other 50% is one of the best action movies I've seen in years. So make of that what you will. But all in all, guys, I had a really good time with Monkey Man. I'm excited to watch it again one day, and maybe it will be better, and I won't feel the length of the film so much on a second viewing. And if nothing else, it's just a really thrilling action movie with great action sequences and a surprisingly emotional punch, and also some very unexpected social commentary that actually works pretty well. And Dev Patel, dude, this movie really solidifies him as one of the best talents we have in the industry today. I feel like I've been saying that a lot recently with some movies that I've been talking about, but I don't know, in my opinion, I think that's something to celebrate. I love all of this rise in, I don't want to say rise in talent, but I love how much of a spotlight is being shone on unsuspecting talents in a way. In the end, Dev Patel is a very sure hand behind the camera. I'm very excited to see what else he directs in the future. Obviously, he's still an incredible actor. He gives an amazing performance in this movie, and this movie also shows that he's pretty talented in the writer's room as well. So all in all, guys, I found Monkey Man to be a damn good time, and I strongly recommend that you see it if you haven't yet. Guys, be sure to let me know what you thought of Monkey Man if you have seen it down in the comments below. Also, if you feel so inclined, please do leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel, and if you would like to go the extra mile, turn on those bell notifications so you get notified every time that I upload new content. Thank you guys so much as always for watching. I will see you in the next video, and until then, keep writing, keep shooting, and keep editing.